Hey guys, this is probably going to be a shorter video than usual. I know, I feel like I'm apologizing for the Q&A every week or something. It's either we miss a week. It's only happened like once or twice. But I'm always talking about it being short or whatnot. This time, especially true, like probably less than an hour, because I'm recording this late at night. I just wanted to get something done for you guys instead of skipping the week altogether. But you know, it's Thanksgiving, American holiday. People take their day off, you meet up with family and so on. I have multiple events and family gatherings and so on happening. And on top of that, we're having a LAN here at the house where a bunch of people are going to play Factorio all day, which is in itself an all-day engagement, just on a different level. So things are a little hectic. So that's why I'm recording instead of my usual ritual of recording this first thing in the morning. I'm recording it after midnight, and I'm going to go to bed at the moment this is rendering, basically, and upload it first thing in the morning, and then go off to my next plan. That kind of stuff. So first question is from Afex101. Hey Keith, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you choose? And there's a question I'm gonna have a wishy-washy, unhelpful answer to, probably. I think I'm allowed to get writing, so I think I'm gonna let's fly back to town and get me a writing skill so I can get around faster, because we're in the Barrens. I don't have super strong opinions about locations on an individual basis necessarily, which may make the answer a little bit more disappointing. But really kind of what I land on instead is the idea that, like, I just want, how do I put this? Let's just switch these out real quick to deal with that. There we go. Be all 8 slot bags now. Alright, that's taken care of. I had so little storage space. I'm not very worldly, so I'm bad at answering this kind of stuff. So instead, I just would say, like, prerequisites. 1, high-speed internet. It's just tied to how my job works, and also just my lifestyle and everything. I'm just used to engaging with internet content a lot, so I want access to that. 2, colder climate. I'm sick of California. It's so hot for so much of the year. So much of the time is just spent with over 100 degree weather, and it's just like, what do you do with that half the time? Realistically, what do you do with that weather most of the time? You just can't go outside really or do any physical activities unless you just want to feel like death afterwards. I'd like to be able to go on longer walks and just exercise all around the year without having to go to like a facility for it and stuff like that. And also, everybody running their air conditioners all the time just leads to tolls on the power system that lead to failures locally, where you just have brownouts and blackouts here and there when like a transformer blows or something because the system's overtaxed, because the entirety of the neighborhood is simultaneously going on power because they're watching television and they're on their computers and everyone's ACs are on at the same time and the lights are on, and like so many things are happening. Even when the sun's down, it's still so hot that you have the air conditioner on. So I'd like to get away from that. Aside from that, what's something I'd like is zoning, like city zoning. American cities have an annoying tendency to completely separate everything, and I think that's kind of to the detriment. I'm really jealous of stuff I hear about. I think I would hear about it like in Germany. They just have like pastry and bread places just like on the, you could like walk to the corner shop. The concept of a corner shop that's in walking distance of where you live is like foreign to me, literally, I guess. Japan, you just like have people living right next to businesses and right next to restaurants and right next to everything. Like it's just kind of all mixed up and all over the place. Like, I really like those kinds of ideas, and I would like to live in a place like that. The unfortunate part would be that pretty much, I think that pretty much in at least in the United States, pretty much means living in a city, which I'm not fond of the idea of. But if I could get around without driving so much, that might not bother me as much. Because really, well, they were right here, huh? I wasn't expecting them to be right here. Neat. I don't like cities because the overcrowding's not great, but really above all else, I just hate driving in cities, which admittedly a lot of people that live in cities supposedly don't drive in them. You use public transport or you walk around and stuff like that, and that has its appeal. That's never been an option for me because whenever I visit a city, it's not where I live, so I have to deal with the vehicle I came in on and stuff like that, and that changes everything. Don't I have like a specialized, like a cool mount? What the fuck? The Wind Rider? The Death Wheel. Look at that. The Plague Bat. That's so absurd looking. I've got to use the motorcycle, right? What in the world? Oh, that's absurd. Alright, well, let's fly on back. Oh wait, I can hearth back. Yeah, it's the crossroads. There we go. Oops. So, I'm not fond with cities because of the driving experience, but you can avoid that to some extent, I suppose. But I would just like the idea of being able to walk to food places. Like right now, even if I want to go to shitty places, like even if I just want to go to like Carl's Jr. or Panda Express, partly because of the zoning and partly because of how spread out the environment is, it's like a 10 to 20 minute drive there and then again on the way back. And it's just, you just lose a lot of time to travel all the time, and you have to get in a car and so on, and it would just be nice if I could just go on a short trip on foot to a lot of these places. And so like when I get really jealous of that stuff when I'm playing in Kamurocho, in Yakuza, or when I visit Japanese locations and games and stuff like that, where I'm just like, everything's just kind of mixed up and it's kind of cool. It has its appeal. But I've always lived in suburban neighborhoods, so I've got the double dose of, there's the American sprawl, where American areas are just so, America's so big and its cities are so spread out that like everything needs a car to get to anywhere due to the nature of how it's all set up. But in addition to that, I'm in suburban neighborhoods where it's like, it is just a bunch of houses. It's a farm of houses, just as far as you can see, it's just houses, and you have to go to the different part of the town to get to the part that's not just houses, and that's intentional. It's specifically meant to be this network of, not network, this huge designated area that's just for living quarters and nothing else. And I don't like that design, but that's what they went with. I'm supposed to get intelligence, and I don't know where to get that, so we might just be running around in circles blindly on this motorcycle for a while I answer questions. But yeah, I don't have really cohesive, specific ideas. It's something I think about a lot because of the fact that I am trying to move, generally speaking. I'm probably going to move soon, there's a decent chance, but I don't think it's going to be like the move. It's going to be a bit of like a slight upgrade slash side grade for a while, because I'm in an intermediate step where I can afford, thanks to you guys largely, I can afford better than I have right now, but I can't afford the next tier of what California has to offer. California is so astonishingly expensive that I'm still paralyzed. So we're making progress financially with Patreon and whatnot, but we're not there yet. A decent thing that might happen is I still think about the potential of moving out to Seattle, for example, because it ticks a lot of my boxes, being an interesting city, being colder climate, and also I know somebody there in the case of Birdcatcher, which is helpful, but moving somebody somewhere just for another person is a little bit weird. Although Andrew did the same shit when he moved to the UAE for a friend of his, which was a hell of a move. But yeah, I'm considering a lot of things. I'm probably going to move somewhere else in California to an arguably shittier city than the one I live in right now, but to a better location with more space. So I'll probably have more room to work with, which would be nice. I'm probably talking about this more than I really should be, because who knows what will happen, but it's kind of in the works. Where it might happen, where instead of living in the same place I've lived in for years now, I'll live in a somewhat different single room thing where I'll still be, unfortunately, sleeping in the same room that I work in, and my office and bed will be in the same places, but it'll be more room and more spread out. Possibly leading to better sleeping conditions just because of being in a different location with a different amount of space and so on and so forth. But it also, the additional space might lead to VR being possible in my living quarters. Because right now I can't mostly. Where I am right now, I can kind of do VR if it's just sitting, but I can't really do VR if I have to do any of the room stuff, because the room scale stuff requires, like, I don't know what the minimum is, but I think it's somewhere closer to 10 by 10, which is a lot of space for really most people's living situations, unless they have their own house, basically. And that's why I think that's why VR never took off in Japan, is because they have such confined living quarters, and a lot of situations where a lot of people live in one packed area together, and it's like the idea of a big open 10 by 10 space never took off because they don't have it. And that's been my situation too. The Kinect faced the same problem, more or less. Take Tonga's eyes to the summit. Can't climb up the surface, can I? Ow. I think I know what they're going for here. Because is this the mountain? I think this might be the mountain. I don't know. There's a really big mountain somewhere in this area, and it's noteworthy for an interesting Easter egg. It has a grave in it, and that grave's interesting in its own right, but if you go to that grave when you're dead, like if you die in this game and you're in ghost form, which admittedly you guys have not seen so far because I haven't died, have I? But if you walk over there in ghost form to the grave, you can see a ghost at the grave. And the ghost has a name, and that name, if I remember correctly, is the name of somebody who died during the development of World of Warcraft. They died before the 1.0 version came out, I believe. I don't know if it's this mountain or another one, but it's one of the really big ones that has a grave at the top. And that's just was just a really interesting thing, was that little tribute. I wonder if it's still there. I haven't checked for like 10 years, honestly, but it's somewhere, or was. Next question is from Sorcerer's Apprentice. It's actually 2 questions. I'll ask them separately though. Sorcerer's Apprentice asks, what are your feelings on climate change? Does it worry you? Do you think we will be able to reverse it or survive its effects? Climate change is one of those terrifying things I try very hard not to think about a lot, because boy am I just incapable of doing anything about it. Yes, it worries me. Its implications vary wildly from, like, horrible, scary tragedy to, like, I mean, it varies wildly from, like, our world having to change economically or restructure itself, or mass migration and people having to relocate constantly because entire areas become unlivable, to, like, that's like the good outcome, and like the bad outcome is like being horribly doomed. I don't understand how to do this. Oh, I think I was supposed to do something very different in this quest. Whoops. I think I was supposed to guide somebody up here from somewhere else. Nope, they figured it out. That was confusing. The worst case scenario is that, like, maybe massive war and the end of mankind. Like, there's terrifying outcomes because when people fight over resources and land, like, things can go really terribly. I don't have answers, and the imagination can go wild with how bad things can get. And I don't know how much of it'll happen in my lifetime, and I also, unfortunately, the people who can affect this kind of stuff just don't care in many cases. And it's one of the downsides of capitalism, which is one of our favorite reoccurring subjects in this Q&A series, is that capitalism's bad. I like capitalism. I grew up with it, and it does a bunch of things that I'm familiar with, and it scares me, the idea of using anything else, because my entire life is structured around capitalism, and it's the only way I understand how to process any of this stuff, and so on and so forth. Like, I get why, I get the loyalty to it, but capitalism is just about different things competing at all costs against each other, and you will bend and break every rule you possibly can in order to become the most successful thing at that you can. And if you don't do that, you'll be outcompeted by somebody who is willing to do all that horrible shit. And then you'll go out of business, and they'll be the ones who win, and they'll be the Jeff Bezos of the world, and you won't. And like, it's inevitable. The system creates this. It's an incentive structure that just says, "Hey, oh my god, I'm swimming with a motorcycle. What the fuck?" Whoever's willing to do the shitty stuff will win, and the people who don't do the shitty stuff will just not be relevant anymore. Like, that kind of stuff is kind of irrelevant to the entirety of how the system works, and it's horrible. That's why you need to have regulations, and why you need to limit how far people can go in certain directions, and actually try to stop this kind of behavior on a really enforced kind of level, because unregulated capitalism just leads to people doing the worst shit possible in order to make maximum profits. And if you don't think that's true, you haven't thought about it that hard. Like, that's all I can say. Like, just look at basic American history. Look at slavery. And then the moment slavery was gone, we had child labor and unethical, horrible working conditions in factories where people were dying on a regular basis. And also they were kind of indentured servants because they were only paid a weird fake currency, and that fake currency was redeemable in the stores that were on the actual campus of the factory. So you were trapped on that factory, and your life was based there forever because you only were ever paid a resource that you could then use as a voucher system to get food and supplies from the same company you're working for in the first place. So you're trapped in an infinite loop where you basically have to work for them forever, because you can't like save up towards like upward mobility towards going towards like other companies or moving out of the state, because you don't actually have an income and stuff like that. Like, that kind of shit has happened in our own history. They will absolutely pay the basic most minimum amount to anybody they can. They will shit on the environment if the environment's in conflict with their ability to turn a profit, then the environment's going to be fucked. All these people work for Uber and so on, and Lyft. They're trying to work for these new weird taxi companies, but those taxi companies make a whole, like, smartphone taxi companies go out of their way to make it as clear as possible, like, wow, you're your own person, you're your own private contractor, you're in control of your own job. But you know why they really do that? Is because you're not a real employee. If they don't make you a real employee, you don't have any real employee rights. So they managed to have a massive mega corporation with crazy, on a crazy scale, that single, like, instantly changes the American landscape and affects how our entire country works. Everybody knows what these driving services are, but they don't have employees. Nobody works for them except for like the basic infrastructure shit. All of the drivers don't work for the company. So unlike taxi drivers, they're not real employees. They don't have rights. All of the rights that we've secured for employees over the years don't apply to those people because they're not employees. So you don't have health care, you don't have insurance, you don't have sick days, you don't have any of these other things. And importantly, they'll terminate you the moment they have a reason to, including, of course, the fact that, like, some of these companies are trying to go straight for the idea of self-driving cars. So they're using people as a support structure to get this business off the ground. Then they spend the money that they make on that to test the ability to create self-driving cars and so on. Then they'll use said self-driving cars to make their own employee base irrelevant, and overnight all those people will just lose their jobs because they helped that company get to a level where they can make those people irrelevant and remove them. Like, this is the type of shit that capitalism incentivizes, because it's like, if you want to learn about capitalism, play a tabletop game. Play any tabletop game with your friends where you're competing against each other, and that's what it is. There's a series of rules. Here's how the game works. Here's the victory conditions. Compete at all costs in order to achieve victory. That's the survival of the fittest competition nature of capitalism. Nothing about capitalism is designed to preserve the environment or make sure that everybody in the American people or whatever, the world and so on, has a job. Nothing about it says you should be able to have healthcare or a house or food or anything. It's just about individual entities being able to outcompete each other financially. And the larger corporations get, the more they take everybody's money until they just suck up everything. And they have incomprehensible amounts of money, while entire other parts of the world can't support themselves at all, and even other parts of their own countries. Like, it's like when people are shipping off about, like, oh, where's Amazon's new HQ gonna be? And it's like everyone's in a bidding war to find who's gonna get to control, who's gonna be where the next Amazon HQ is. But, like, you know who's gonna work at that Amazon HQ? Amazon's gonna build an HQ and then send their own employees that they already had there, because that's how they expand. They're not going to create new jobs there. They're just going to have a new building, and in the process of building that base, they're going to have these huge multi-billion-dollar tax breaks from the local economy, because based on the premise that they're going to somehow create jobs. That bidding war is them turning all the states against each other to compete for the privilege of having an Amazon HQ in their base. Meanwhile, the American taxpayers spend billions of dollars on said HQ, because that's what the tax break is. Like, that's the local cost. The people, like, all the actual human beings that live in those kinds of areas generally should not want an Amazon HQ to show up locally, because that's just going to take your taxes away to help a corporation make more money. A corporation that's already astonishingly successful. And why do they do that? Because they can. We had this conversation about loot boxes well, I've talked about loot boxes here plenty, but I did the Overwatch video, and we talked about loot boxes in the comments and stuff like that, and there was the idea that, like, Activision Blizzard doesn't need more money. Like, Overwatch is a wildly successful video game. It does not need loot boxes to fund its further development. It makes so much money every day just on sales of the game alone, because it's so popular and new people buy it constantly all the time, that is enough for it to fund further development. They can keep making new maps, new characters, and so on, and that all they have to do is keep making more and keep hyping up the game and keep it as an active game, and people will keep buying it, and that will in turn keep funding additional development of said game. Like, that's all you need. That's it. And that absolutely works. It's the Minecraft model, that whole system. The idea, like, there's probably microtransactions in it now, but I played Minecraft for years, and it was funded entirely just on the fact that people kept buying Minecraft because it was popular. And the same applies to Overwatch. Like, it's just so popular that people will keep buying it, millions and millions of copies of it, and that's enough to fund making new characters and making new costumes or making new levels and whatnot. So, like, the idea that Blizzard needs microtransactions and loot boxes that exploit people's gambling addictions and they know ruin people and, like, all that other stuff, like, that's not necessary to fund additional development. They do that because they can. If you can blame it on the Activision part of Activision Blizzard if you want, because Blizzard definitely felt less greedy back in the day. Blizzard, the main part of Blizzard back before the merger with Activision, definitely seemed like they were more willing to just make a good game, and based on its sales, they would further develop said game, like Diablo and World of Warcraft and StarCraft and Warcraft and so on. And then after Activision merged with them, they were suddenly really interested in having microtransactions in every single game. Right off the bat, Diablo 3 had the real money auction house, and every game they make has microtransactions. This game used to just have a monthly fee and nothing else, really. Maybe there was the character transfer fee and a couple of other things that were, like, there to maybe just disincentivize you from using them, really. But now this game has tons of, like, purchasable mounts and stuff like that you can buy with real money. Overwatch is overwrought with loot boxes and all that. And it's because Activision wants to turn a massive profit. They want to show their investors that they're always growing and so on and so forth. Like, they make money for money's sake. It's not for the art, and it's not for the employees. The average worker at those places isn't rolling in bank when the company makes massively more money. It's just the higher ups and the CEOs and the investors that make them, that actually benefit. The normal employees don't see shit of it. The Activision will just pay them whatever they need to stay competitive and keep those people on board, but they won't give them an adequate percentage of the amount of profits that's proportioned to how massive of a success the company is on those people's backs, because that's not how capitalism works. This is why that's why it's really interesting to have. That's why it's really important to have heavy regulations of how a lot of these different systems work, and also look into how these things happen, is because that's the only way that the environment gets protected. That's the only way that people get protected. If you want to have rights as a worker, you need regulations and you need unions and so on and so forth, because the company will shit on you the moment you're not necessary. The video game industry is horrible. The moment a AAA project is over, it's common practice to just fire everybody. Well, that was our big game we were working on. Have fun finding new jobs. You probably won't even have a severance pay. It's like, well, the project's over. Fuck off. Go find a new job. Like, there are companies where you get to keep your job and they keep you on, but there's plenty of companies where they just get rid of people. And it's an indie thing and it's a AAA thing where you just get rid of all the employees because you're in the in-between games phase. You're scaling down, and so you're wasting money if you're paying these people. That's potentially one of the upsides of something like Ubisoft being this ever-present machine that's always churning games out, is that the one upside is that, like, well, its employees are probably more secure. I don't know for real on the case-by-case basis what the case is. There's too much to know, but, like, yeah, that's a thing in video game development, is just to fire everybody when a game's over, because you don't want to pay for those people. They need like salaries and wages, so get rid of them. And that sounds horrible, but that's what they do. And so that's, yeah, like so much of the world is capitalistic, or is a series of governments that compete with each other, because ultimately the way that the governments interact with each other and the way that states and countries compete with each other is basically capitalism on a global scale. And so that's the reality of the world. You could have a fascist government, you could have a socialist government, you could have really any type of government and economic system, but ultimately when it comes to that government's competition with other governments and other states, they ultimately behave in that manner. It's that capitalistic system of competing with each other and undercutting each other and just trying to fight for supremacy and all that and succeed at all costs. And it makes a bit more sense on that scale, just because, yeah, how else do you work with each other when we don't all consider each other to be allies? And that's another problem. We are not united as a people internationally. And that's one of the reasons I like the look, at least, or at least the idea of stuff like the EU, is at least it's like trying to bring people together and have people work as a actual series of governments that are united in some way, because if we don't become united, then we're always going to be competing with each other. And if we're always competing with each other, then that's the priority. When governments compete with each other, that's their goal at all costs, is to come out on top. You're always just worried about your private interest instead of the global one. And so on some level, yeah, like the governments of the world becoming at peace with each other and working together is like the only way this kind of problem feels like it would ever get solved. And I hate that I don't see that ever happening. It's a real big bummer that I have no faith that that could happen. That's why it's fun to read wish fulfillment stories about like Star Trek or Mass Effect, where like we encounter aliens and we get in a fight with those aliens or whatever, and then suddenly we find ourselves united as a result. It's almost always aliens. This idea that aliens are going to reunite us with each other because we get united against an outside threat. And that outside threat doesn't have to be entirely hostile. I think in Mass Effect, I think it was the Turians at first contact war. But ultimately, the outside threat just becomes the fact that it's your government versus other governments. Once again, it's just, instead of being the intergovernments of the world, it becomes the governments of your world versus all the other worlds, and so that you end up united as a people as a result of that. that idea is exciting at the very least. Like, oh, well, it's not like we're not at war with the Solarians and we're not at war with the Asaris, but, you know, we have to stand up against them and function as our own government and demand respect and all that other stuff. And we get focused on that stuff, and suddenly we're maybe not focused on being enemies of each other. Like, that kind of grander scale political distraction is, it's all wish fulfillment that makes it feel like maybe we can come together one day, but we will never know unless it happens, I guess. Which is actually, I brought it up a few times in this playthrough, in this Q&A series. I think that's more or less the point of an absolutely remarkable thing by Hank Green. Hank Green is constantly losing his shit about global warming and whatnot on his channel, both on Vlogbrothers and his private channel, Hank's channel. Hank Green being one of the oldest YouTubers and one of the more influential people, and creator of VidCon and SciShow and Crash Course and a bunch of other things. Yeah, he made a book called An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, which I read recently and quite enjoyed. And there's a lot of cathartic stuff in there to enjoy because of, just for being a YouTuber, basically. There's a bunch of interesting concepts and so on that like I directly relate to, and I can't vouch for how much people won't or won't relate to that stuff, but I feel like a lot of people will across the board, just because in the modern world, whether you're an actual active YouTuber who makes it as a living or not, all of us are on social media on some level, and we're all engaging with this form of performing. If you're on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or something, everybody's weirdly in a form of performing, whether or not it's their job or not. Rather, it was nicely put in the novel itself, where in their internal monologue, the protagonist was admitting the fact that they themselves lie to themselves about how much they're unplugged, and that they're not like all the other normies and whatnot. Like they're not one of those people that's always faking it for the media. But of course they are. It's just that's part of their, like, I think the line in the thing was basically that like not having a carefully crafted internet persona was their carefully crafted internet persona. And I'm like, oh, that's so fitting, because that's the whole thing. People claiming that they're not a part of it are themselves so deeply a part of it, and so on. Anyway, this is so far off topic, but oh yeah, right. I was talking about an absolutely remarkable thing because of the fact that I'm going to die. Hey, you guys want to see what dying looks like? There we go. Hey, I'm at the mountain. Let's go up to the top and see if it's the right one or not. Spend the rest of this video dead. I completed my objective at least. But the reason I brought it up is that he's constantly freaking out about global warming himself on his channel. And I think that a lot of what happens in Absolutely Remarkable Thing with the Carls showing up everywhere and how people react to it globally, I think that was his version of the inciting incident that hopefully unites the world with itself in the presence of potential alien interaction and stuff like that. And I think that was his wish fulfillment in the face of global warming in his story to an extent. I think that was actually another version of it. I tried very hard not to spoil much about that book. I just kind of vaguely recommend it and hope people check it out. And I hope I'm not making a mistake and recommending something that no one actually enjoys. But I don't know. I don't know anybody else who's read it, and I just hear about other YouTubers that enjoyed it. But that's not much to go on. So I don't know. But yeah, that's my incredibly. Unfortunately, I don't see anyone up here. It might be a different mountain. There's a lot of mountains around here, unfortunately. Might be that one over there. Global warming is very real. I hate saying that it's even real because it suggests that that's up for debate or something, when it's really not, even a little bit. We're constantly in danger from the fact that a lot of political debate often poses two opposing arguments as if those two things are equally valid choices, when really one of them will be 99.9% of all evidence, and also a majority of the people will support one thing, and then some group of just kind of deluded people will cling to like basically a lie they heard that they think is evidence, and they'll just cling to that because it reaffirms something about themselves, either because they are politically motivated to not believe in the thing, or because the thing is scary, so it's more convenient to not believe in it, because if you believe in it, it's really scary what you might have to do, or what might happen in the world if it's true. So the easier option is just to not believe it's true at all, because then you never have to engage with figuring out what solutions, or how there might not be any, and how fucked everything might be. That's, I don't really mean to make a jab right now, but that's a little bit of one of the somewhat religious things, is people will pose to me like, why aren't you religious and stuff like that, and like one of the things that comes up is this idea of like, they'll bring up like the risk reward square of logic, of this idea that like, well, what's the cost, what's the benefit / cost if you're wrong or if you're right? Like, if you're shouldn't you hedge your bets? Because like if you're religious and there is an afterlife, then you have that, but if you don't do it and there is one, then you lose horribly, because there's like a hell and stuff like that. Like that kind of like back and forth, that cost benefit analysis, like that kind of stuff is how conspiracies also work, where it's like people will manufacture this so fucking deep, this wasn't here before, because whoa, a fatigue meter, that's trippy. Oh, but you can just go right over here. I guess I was supposed to go around a little bit more. There's a shallower area. If you go in a sufficiently deep part of the ocean, there's a fatigue meter that will kill you, just to stop you, because breath only works on this when you're below the surface, but it's how they stop you from just swimming out into the ocean in this game, basically, is it'll eventually kill you based on distance. What was I saying? Like, there's a lot of things where people seem to just believe that that's not true, because it's just so inconvenient to deal with the reality of it being true. It's not unrelated to like the idea of like acknowledging the fact that our electronic devices are made in Chinese sweatshops, where the workers are treated so poorly that they routinely try to kill themselves. Like, acknowledging those kinds of things and changing your life around it, or like acknowledging that there's cruelty to animals, and it might be best to not eat certain types of food or meats, or even the idea that like it might even be literally healthier to not eat certain types of foods. Like, on top of potential ethical concerns, like people will, me included, will actively try to turn a blind eye to those kinds of difficulties, because not acknowledging them is easier. And much like how human beings are willing to spend their entire life engaging in unhealthy activities that will eventually kill them via heart disease or some other problem, we on a global scale are just as willing to actively ignore massive problems because it's inconvenient to deal with the solutions of it. That's why it was actually really, like, the Al Gore, it was a documentary, wasn't it? The title "Inconvenient Truth" was so incredibly fitting, because that's more or less how we treat the entire idea. And this is actually, this question was asked a while ago, but this is the day where I'm saying this stuff on the day that I retweeted Donald Trump today, quoting him. My tweet was basically, right around now, I really relate to those ghosts in horror movies that just grab you by the face and just scream directly into your face for seemingly no reason. It's like, why is that ghost screaming? It's like, right now I feel like that ghost in response to Donald Trump, because, oh boy, he called out global warming as being a hoax again today, November 23rd, 2018. The United States president is not, he's trying to disprove global warming. He's like, wow, liberals, you idiots, there's a cold snap right now, so much for global warming, am I right? And I'm like, you son of a bitch, you. And it's like, it's a real tear out your hair moment, especially if you're like, I mean, really for anyone who knows anything about the subject, but it's like, I was a physical science major, man. Like, I have a geology degree. I know so many other people from other physical science degrees, like earth sciences and chemistry and biology and so on. It's like, people who know the scientific method and how the scientific community works and so on. And it's like, the idea that this is a conspiracy literally doesn't make sense. And watching people ruin the world via their willful ignorance hurts. And I'm forced to reconcile the fact that this person is our democratically elected president. I almost said the majority. Sorry, I gotta correct myself. A minority of the country that, due to how lines are drawn in our country, become the voting majority, regardless of being not the majority. We're able to elect him, and he just spouts nonsense. And in a time of great need for change, where we desperately need to acknowledge actually how much trouble we're in before things keep getting worse, we have this guy for at least 4 years probably, and God forbid maybe even 8 years, because in my entire life so far, as a living American, I've never seen a president only have one term. He might get reelected somehow, bafflingly. I can't say anything about it because I didn't think he'd be elected the first time, but he managed to do it anyway. I'm forced to reconcile that we have this guy who is just going to just fuck us. I'm sorry to be so political, but this is something that should not be political. And everybody... I have a scorched earth approach to anybody who politicizes global warming. Everybody who treats it like a political issue to benefit off of is garbage. So Donald Trump is a horrible human being that is a threat to humanity. And I'm not mincing words here. Like, this is a problem. And it's not necessarily a condemnation of everything that he ever stands for, and that everyone who ever agrees with anything he's ever said is bad. Although that he does a lot of other things that are examples of those. But global warming is a genuine threat that everyone who can possibly look at this thing and knows what the fuck they're talking about all agree. There's no debate. Like, there's not in the air. There's no question here. It's amazing to watch people deny gravity, basically. It's infuriating, and it's depressing. And he's one of two things. He's either a massive idiot and he has no idea what he's talking about, and he's basically the equivalent of my dad, just spouting stupid bullshit that he believes, and just not having the faculties and critical thinking to figure this shit out for himself, and nobody can explain it to him on a level where he'll properly understand it. So he's just going to keep spouting bullshit and clinging to his stupid views that don't make sense. Or alternatively, and I believe this one more honestly, he knows what he's doing. I think he knows that global warming is in fact real and climate change is a serious problem, but he doesn't care because opposing it benefits him. And this is a reoccurring thing. It comes up with the YouTube skeptics community, and it comes up with Donald Trump and a lot of other people. It's like there's entire groups of people that financially benefit from opposing certain viewpoints because they can rally the people that will support that stuff, and those people will financially support them and give them power and vote for them, and they value the power they get from lying to people and being the easy answer to people that just want to believe a certain thing. They value that power more than they do actually making the world better. It goes right back to the capitalistic ideas of like, this is how you outcompete. They're like, people want to have a living and they want to have food and they want to have a house, and then what you often find is that once people then find themselves on that level, when they are making it, they don't stop there at just succeeding at life. They go to the next level, and they want to keep succeeding and they want to keep over succeeding, and they want to take and get everything they can, and these types of people will only keep expanding. And that when they don't have ethical boundaries anymore, they'll do this kind of stuff where they will just be willing to fuck the whole world for their own benefit. And that's what this kind of shit is. And it's devastating to watch. To just know that all the people in power that could have an effect on these kinds of things, the very process that puts them in power filters out the people who would care about this kind of stuff. So they're a bunch of fucking sociopaths. Like, everyone that has the most power in the world tends to be the very same people that will not use it correctly, because if they were to care about the kind of stuff, they wouldn't have gotten in power in the first place, because they would have been filtered out along the way. Because nothing about the capitalistic incentive systems incentivizes being a good person. That's just not how the rules are written. And as you've seen with me playing Pathologic, or people playing video games, or people playing tabletop games, you don't really make actions motivated by what makes you a good person. You make actions based on what makes you win. And so, like, I've seen so many people on YouTube that just gross me out, and Trump himself, that just, like, I'm like, you can't believe this shit. There's no way. You've seen too much for you to believe the things you're saying. But you're just... you're saying these things because you know that people that believe those things will keep giving you power. The ignorant and the people that are under you will keep giving you power because they want to believe that thing, and the people that are above you, or people that have power, will reward you for saying those things because of the fact that they also benefit from those things being said. Like, it's a shit show, and like, I don't know how we come back from that. And the scary thing is that, like, when you look at the graphs, there's a really good Hank Green video about this stuff. It's just like, the climate change is already going to be devastating. We cannot change it now. That's kind of the current problem, is like, we cannot currently improve the situation. We cannot currently undo how bad things are going to get. There's a certain level of climate change that we've already committed to, and that's just the direction the graph's going to go from here on out. That's just going to get worse and worse and worse for the foreseeable future, and basically that curve just will just continue to get worse exponentially as long as we keep contributing. And it's like, it's fucked. The best thing we can do is, if we turn around right now, we don't prevent climate change, we don't curb climate change, we just stop making it worse. And that's the best we can hope for. That's how scary things are now. And this is a bummer, because you're like, some of you are like wanting to look at like escapist media right now, and this is part of that, but like, that's the answer, more or less. That's how bad things are. I think I need to capture this. I'm supposed to be on the boat, right? Shit's fucked. I don't know. I'm enjoying my years of not having the world collapse economically, and hopefully living for a while without wearing masks that filter the air like much of China often has to deal with. And here in California, that was the reality for a while. It kind of still is the reality, that like the air was so bad that if you went outside you had to wear a mask, because you can't breathe in California due to the amount of fires. And there might be more points towards the idea that Trump's just an idiot, because when he came to Paradise, California, to do the presidential thing of standing in the ashes and being all like, this is so sad, I'm the president and I came here because I'm empathetic, and look at this display of how good of a person I am. This is how I get more support, right? I'm a politician. All that process. That display of performative empathy, which is gross in its own nature, but also if you don't display, then you're also a lunatic, because then people are like, why are you ignoring this thing? He stood on the ashes of Paradise, California, a city that was completely burned away and is gone now, lost in a massive blaze. Dozens of people confirmed dead, somewhere in the ballpark of 1,000 people currently missing, possibly dead. He stood in those ashes and called it Pleasure, California. And then when people, in a chorus of people kind of corrected him, whispering around him, you saw everyone look for a second, everyone react around him, like, oh my god, did he say pleasure instead of paradise? And then he called it Pleasure, California a second time. He misnamed the city that he was pretending to care about twice. Meanwhile, he talks about how he's going to cut funds to forest management in California as a punishment if we don't stop having fires, apparently. And then he said that in Finland they rake the forests, which what the fuck? No, no, they don't. But also, we don't have Finland-like forests. Just because they have forests doesn't mean our forests are like their forests. So he's like such a mixture of unempathetic and stupid and wrong, and I don't know what to make of it, because his stupid isn't necessarily stupid. He might not be an idiot on some of the stuff. The fact that he said pleasure makes me think he might just be an idiot. But the fact that he says the other shit, where he proposes stupid, easy answers about raking forests or whatever the fuck, that stuff serves a purpose too. Because giving stupid, easy answers makes him sound like a problem solver and like he's smart, and so that he's electable, and you gotta take, and like you were right to elect him. So like that stuff fuels his base. Like I've seen people within California reposting his shit and acting like he's an authority figure in this whole concept, and that he's right and we need to get our shit together, and it's all I've been baffled by watching how like people who just align with him will literally side with Trump against our own state, basically. Like, it's been fascinating to watch. And yeah, the United States in particular is so deeply divided politically that we can't come together on basically anything. I'm making a huge risk of even talking about this in a video because some people will be of the other side, and so they'll just be mad at me for even challenging any of this stuff. And that's fucked too. And the world's deeply politically divided when we have China and Russia and the United States and the EU and all these different competing groups, and North Korea, and people that are in many cases unreconcilable and actively trying to subvert each other's governments and so on. Like, we're so at each other's throats internationally and inside of our own countries, between like Trump and Brexit and so on. Like, we have massive inside of our country conflicts in addition to the ones that are outside of our countries, and I every time I look at it, I just feel worse. And we're literally out of time. We have negative time, and we have leaders of the world that would rather plug their ears and go la 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 la, either because they genuinely are too stupid to understand this stuff, or because they just benefit directly from playing that role. And people will play that role right to the grave. Like, it's like the idea of like when you see like a far-right YouTuber that courts some crazy, like, dangerous audience members, but will just continue to keep saying what they need to say to keep those people happy because they make money off of those people being happy. Like, people will make the world worse actively if it benefits them individually. I recently, like, when the Vegas shootings were happening, I saw somebody post a video claiming that the Vegas shooting was a false flag, that the entire thing didn't happen. It's like, why would you do that? There's no evidence for that idea. It's just somebody making shit up because people will repost their videos and that stuff will go viral. And like, circulating ideas that entire shootings are false flags is devastatingly counterproductive, and that stuff will get millions of views. And I had to tell the person who posted that on Facebook, because it was somebody I knew, because like I went to that person's YouTube channel. They had another video saying there was 2 shooters at the Vegas shooting. It wasn't a, and I'm like, is it a false flag, or were there 2 shooters? You can't do both conspiracies. But of course that guy can, because both videos will get shared. And he'll make money on both of them. And that part's when that's when it gets gross, because they're making ad revenue, and maybe they have a Patreon. They financially make their money. Their livelihood depends on them making the world worse every day, inventing conspiracies and responses to tragedies. That's the Alex Jones of the world, that kind of shit. There's a bunch of those people, just like him, who specifically financially benefit from making up bullshit that just makes the world worse, because it gets clicks and it gets shares, and some people believe that shit. Either because it reinforces something they already want to believe, or in these cases, like they want to believe that like the liberals are going to take their guns with gun control. So it's easier just to believe that every tragedy isn't true. Because if every single tragedy is just fake, then you don't have to believe that we might need gun reform or anything like that, or even just basic rules that help reduce bad gun things to bad people, or maybe that certain guns are better for mass murdering people on a scale that isn't reasonable to have in society. None of those questions can be addressed because, oh, that's convenient. All the gun murders are just fake. It's a series of massive conspiracies where the government gets a bunch of crisis actors and they performatively pretend to have a massacre of children. But none of it was ever real. Oh, that's convenient. See? You don't have to believe that any tragedy happened because it was all actors, or crisis actors. It's a false flag. So now you don't have to feel bad. So now you don't have to question whether or not there should be any sort of gun reform because no tragedy happened in the first place. Isn't that convenient? God, there's more recommended reading you can check out. Sorry, I was trying to read it because it's like behind me. There's a graphic novel called Sabrina by Nick Donasso. It was nominated for a pretty big award that it has only ever been nominated a bunch of literary books and never a graphic novel. So it's the first of its entire category to be nominated at all. It didn't win, but it was an earth-shattering thing just to have it nominated at all. It's called Sabrina. It's a graphic novel about this basic idea. A person is murdered, and it's horrible, and the world politicizes their murder, and it's devastating. It's a real rough thing to get through, but I recommend it. It's just a strong graphic novel. Like, people will go to insane degrees to do this stuff, and and there's also that part of people that wants to feel special, like they're the chosen one, like they're Neo from the Matrix, where like the whole world's a conspiracy, but they're special because they know about it. And then that's part of this. That's the seed that a lot of conspiracy theories grow from. Is that on some level, all of us want to believe something crazy like that because we want to feel special, like we're the one person that sees through the wool that's over everybody's eyes and stuff like that. And so that just makes things worse. And I celebrated so much when Alex Jones just got fucked and was just removed from so many platforms, because that kind of stuff needs to be off the face of the planet. That is a person who financially benefits from just making the world worse every day and contributing nothing. And it's like, you can't even defend it on entertainment value, because no amount of entertainment is worth the fact that he's doing that. It's horrible. Like, never let him live down the fact that he was calling the Sandy Hook shootings false flags. That children being killed is something he turned into he pretended it was a fictional story because he could rile people up and make money off of that. Like, that's... And he's got that lackey that works with him that talks about how soy's feminizing people and making them liberals while selling their supplements that contain soy. Like, they're con artists. They're monsters. and that I'm bringing this all up because partly because I'm just on a tangent at this point, but also because it speaks to the grander scale of how fucked we are on global warming. Is like we can't even get past this shit. Like that's part of the people that stir up the counter arguments, is that people will act like are equal, is that kind of shit. Anyway, I'm gonna go to bed. It's been late. Hope you enjoyed this exceptionally political rant, I guess. That's where we've gone, apparently. I sincerely hope you guys all already believed in climate change, because I would be kind of distressed if I was courting fans that don't believe in that stuff. But if you do not believe in climate change and you think that it's just this stupid conspiracy made up to hurt certain corporations or whatever, first of all, why are you being like the equivalent of like a Blizzard fanboy, but for like Enron or whatever, like for a fuel company that doesn't care about you? But second of all, please, for the love of God, get educated. Like, get your shit together. You like, if you don't believe in global warming and you've got this far, like, I gotta tell you, like, I swear to God, like, this isn't like whether or not you think Stranger Things is good or not, or whether or not you'd like The Last Jedi. This isn't like some subjective, debatable thing. If you don't believe in global warming, this is probably the most you've been wrong about anything in your entire life. And every day you continue forward being wrong about this thing, you're actively an embarrassment. And it's like you just look like an idiot. And don't get defensive. Fucking get it together. Grow up. Like, you're part of the wave that makes everything worse. And so much of the world knows better. And every time you open your mouth about this shit, if you try to argue against it, like, it's like you're just embarrassing yourself and worrying the people around you that are just concerned that in their circle, in their family or circle of friends, there's somebody this deluded that they know, and they don't know how to address that. They don't know what to do about that. And like, you literally will have better relationships with a lot of people probably if you get your shit together, because they don't know what the fuck to do with you. Like, holy shit. Anyway, see you guys next time. I probably made somebody very angry just now because people don't change their minds. For that subject, there's a nice episode of the You Are Not So Smart podcast I can recommend about how people minds are basically never changed by discussion, and I'm basically just singing to the choir for those that already believe in the same things as I do, and I'm wasting my time for everybody else and potentially actively hurting myself, because if I say anything controversial, the only thing that can happen is I can just lose Patreon support. Like, that's one thing to consider. Me saying this shit does not benefit me. The people who deny climate change actively benefit from denying it. If I say anything controversial ever, am only hurting myself. If I'm ever rude to a Patreon subscriber or just say something they don't like, the only outcome really is just that I lose Patreon support and my life gets worse, and I lose financial support and I make negative progress towards my goals in life. That's what happens when I say controversial things. If I say things people like, generally speaking, that doesn't actually lead to an increase. So I can just maintain, basically. That is the fun background detail with these kinds of ideas. If I do a series like this, it can arguably only hurt me. I don't know. Food for thought, I suppose. But yeah, I'm not backed by any conspiratorial things that incentivize me to say these things. But anyway, I'm gonna go to bed. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. This was the least holiday appropriate topic, probably. But we have to address it a little bit, both because somebody asked it and because, I swear to God, the President of the United States, has continued to deny climate change, and today openly and publicly reaffirmed that today. Wow. What a world we live in. See you guys next time.